In this video, I look at the historic downtown of Aalborg, with buildings dating back to the Middle Ages. I take a walk through the cobblestone streets and back alleys and look at an old church and a number of historic houses. This is the historic district of Aalborg. So this is an interesting alleyway I saw, and just looking around. These are all actually sidewalk alleyways. They're too narrow for cars to get through. But this gives some idea of what this old city actually looks like. And another shot of this alleyway from inside the alleyway. I believe these are restaurants to the left and right. Some interesting shops. Looks like some of them sell artwork or pottery or something like that. There's some shrubs. There's actually one of the churches in the background there. And then there's this archway here. Actually, hear a cat meowing in the background. There's some pots in that window there. Yeah. Not really sure what that sign says because I can't read Danish, but it says, I believe, Darstead or something of that nature. This is interesting as well. Not really sure what this is. There's 16 different, I guess they would be, actually not even sure what they are. There's one of them that's a face, another's a baby. There's a sailboat. Looks like there's a lady down there and a guy in the corner. And then there's a couple which look like they're shell wheels. And down here is another alleyway, which I'm going to take out and look at in a second. This is that alleyway, and out back there it looks like there's a more modern street. But all of these alleyways are old brickwork, and there's a shop there. There's actually some teddy bears in the window and a magic hat, so I wonder what that is. And that's what the fire hydrants look like in Denmark. Yeah, and in there was that shop with pottery and stuff. So yeah, it says Longe Arts and Crafts. And back there's that other alleyway that I was in earlier. And here's another alleyway with the church to the left. So this is the entrance to the church. And there's actually some construction going on here, but yeah. And what's interesting is these houses, these row houses, are actually kind of short and squat compared to modern houses. I believe the people at the time that these houses were constructed were a little shorter than they are today due to the nutritional value that they got. So the result is that the houses and the furniture are all a bit smaller than they are today. But there's the church, and there's the tower of the church. This is not the old cathedral, but this is another church in Aalborg. And what's interesting, I just noticed, is this frieze work up there above the door. That looks kind of interesting. Yeah. Yeah, you can see how, you can kind of imagine how this place would have looked 100, 200 years ago based on these row houses. I mean, the color probably wouldn't be the same. These look like they're modern paint jobs. There's actually a Denmark flag in this window right there. I've actually seen a lot of them in windows, but yeah. And this is inside of the church. The main hall is closed, but this is just the entrance area. So over there's the main door that I showed earlier, but this is the entrance of the church. And you can see some interesting chandeliers and actually interesting archwork as well. And that's interesting as well, that candle holder right there. And imagine the main part of this church would be through that door. There's the front of the church, and that red building over there actually looks kind of interesting. I actually like the red and green crosswork design of that building. So that building in the center behind the trees, and then there's another interesting alleyway. And I guess just looking around, there's another alleyway over here. And then there's a shopping center in this direction. And back there's the construction, and the entrance to the church is down that direction. Here's a closer look at that red building, so the red building with the crosswork. And I do really like the design, although they could do a better job watering their hedges. They're all brown and dry, but other than that, it looks like a really nice house. And there's this brick building here, which looks rather fancy. And then there's what's actually a fountain over here. So let's see if I can get the entire fountain. And there's some hedgework behind it. Not really sure what this building behind it is. There's like an interesting rounded design that you don't see in the US. And then behind it there's those row houses again. And there's the base of the church. Yeah, this square is actually a really interesting area as well. And this actually gives you some idea of how these buildings are constructed. So I believe that framework there is actually the construction of that red building, which is actually behind us. So this red framework building. But you can see how they use wooden construction to construct the frame. And then this is actually some old pictures of the building. Not really sure when it was constructed. I see what looks like dates of 1340, although I imagine the building can't have been that old. But this might be reference to the time period from which the construction was taken. I also see a date that looks like 1877. So that actually looks like it could be consistent with the date the building was constructed, because I also noticed in this picture here there's a date that looks like 1908, so maybe the building was constructed in 1908. Yeah, I wish I could read Danish, because then I could read the text of the sign and actually have a better idea of when and how this building was constructed. But there's an old picture of the church and another picture of the red framework house. This building here actually gives you some interesting insight into how buildings in this country were designed and built. So if you look at the siding of the building, you see that rough plaster work. So basically they would construct these buildings, and then they would, in some cases they'd construct them using wooden framework, and then they'd cover the outside of the building with this type of plaster, which gives it a lot of strength. So these buildings are actually still around, which is a testament to how well constructed they are. Another thing that's interesting is their roof design. So a lot of these buildings have tile roofs, so stone tile roofs, which are actually remind me kind of the design you'd see in Japan, but that's not something you see in the US, where all the roofs are usually timber, or if you go to the older buildings, thatch work. And just to give a look around, there's the church, and I'm actually in front of the red building with the framework, and there's the shopping center. And here's another pair of old buildings, although it looks like they actually tore out the front wall of this building and added a modern window. It actually looks like the building on the far side might be a restaurant. That building looks like it's actually a beauty parlor.